It is a period of culture war. Science fiction actors, striking from a cursed website, have demonstrated they spent half a century not understanding the themes of the franchises they've led. In one corner of the multiverse, Captain Kirk has his face in his hands, as the actor that played him in our world rallies against wokeness and SJWs. When did Star Trek become woke, he cries, somehow not able to compute that the character he played was a space socialist who spent his adventures fighting racism, colonialism, and capitalism and... Tribbles? Tribbles woke? Anyway, Kirk can't believe his eyes. He's living in a post-scarcity world that is as close to fully automated luxury communism as you can get while still having presence of Earth and ship-based hierarchies. And he was written by a Maoist with pretty revolutionary attitudes despite his history of horrific misogyny. In the other corner of the multiverse, we go from the distant future to the distant past. From our galaxy to one far, far away. As the Force ghost of Luke Skywalker cries, screams, and throws up at comments from his actor in our timeline, Mark Hamill. While Luke Skywalker and the Rebel Alliance were, according to George Lucas, a stand-in for the Viet Cong and the evil empire being the United States of America. In what is on its face a story of anti-colonial struggles, Mark Hamill goes to bat in the defense of a settler colonial state, from open letters to public statements.
America stands with Israel,
he proudly says, as Luke Skywalker cries a single tear.
He didn't understand it,
he says, as his actor praises in one fell swoop both the Galactic Empire and its proxy across the Sea of Stars. And just when Luke Skywalker thinks it can't get any worse, Mark Hamill drops the most incomprehensibly racist tweet of his career.
Korea, born during this one. Vietnam, came of age during this one. Iraq, married with children during this one. Afghanistan, became a senior citizen during this one. We never learn. You can't force democracy on those who don't want it. With this tweeted a lovely picture of Albert Einstein, for good measure, an outspoken socialist who turned down the presidency of Israel due to its roots in fascism and colonialism. But I just wanted to make that note. But Korea? Vietnam? You can't force democracy on those who don't want it? No. No! No! Well, Mark, guys, listen. You're both playing space socialists who are explicitly against colonial war and bigotry. What are you guys doing? Did you not read your scripts? How did you manage to miss this? It's not even subtext. It's just bloody text. Ugh, well, thank God I'm here to help you out. That's right. To save both of you from this public relations disaster, you've both decided to inexplicably die on the hill of. Your agents both called me, for some reason, ages after the fact, Brigitte Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, a British newspaper that's had to recently pick up extra work trying to make baby boomers look less racist because, let's be honest, the print industry is dying. Why do you think Lord Nonsbottom had me start a YouTube channel? The poor fucker only found out what one was because Dan here accidentally screwed up a dark ritual and ended up summoning Mr. Beast instead of, Mr. Beast. Either way, it's no issue for me. I'll describe to you both exactly what this problem is. But it's up to the two of you whether you try and fix it, so listen up and listen good, because I won't tell you where you fucked up twice, unless you just watch this video again, in which case I will tell you how you fucked up twice, and how many other times you want. I didn't really think this one through, did I? George Lucas has been very open about his political message in Star Wars. In fact, Apocalypse Now was almost a George Lucas directed movie, so you can see his ideas in action there. A more allegorical version of the Vietnam War, with the heroics of the Viet Cong disguised behind a veil of science fiction metaphor, was the eventual shape George Lucas's Vietnam story would take in Star Wars. Although this wasn't necessarily a distinct movie from Lucas's original vision for Apocalypse Now, according to The Secret History of Star Wars by Kaminski and Thompson. Even Lucas's never-filmed war project, Apocalypse Now, later transformed into a film by Coppola, contained much of the same themes, such as ill-equipped humans overcoming technological oppression. Walter Murch offers the opinion that Apocalypse Now essentially transformed into Star Wars. Star Wars is George's version of Apocalypse Now, rewritten in another worldly context, Murch explained. The rebels in Star Wars are the Vietnamese, and the Empire is the United States. This transformation can even be read into the first treatment, in which a group of rebels strike out from a jungle and topple an empire, and this theme would swell in importance in the subtext of the eventual screenplay. A lot of my interest in Apocalypse Now has carried over into Star Wars, Lucas admitted in the making of Star Wars. I figured that I couldn't make that film because it was about the Vietnam War, so I would essentially deal with some of the same interesting concepts that I was going to use and convert them into a space fantasy. So you'd have essentially a large technological empire going after a small group of freedom fighters or human beings. So in this light, knowing the intentions behind Star Wars both as a story and a franchise, and how clear Lucas has been about these visions, it's a wonder Mark Hamill came out the other side with the take that you can't force democracy on those that don't want it, referring to a bunch of people the United States have systematically tried to bomb into submission or complete genocide. But in particular, you would think Hamill would catch the irony in applying his frankly racist and borderline fascist take to the Vietnamese. The guy practically played Ho Chi Minh in the last 3 movies, even if you don't count the sequel trilogy in which Lucas basically had no part, and I suppose the holiday special, because honestly, if there were any themes in the Star Wars holiday special besides the sheer cosmic horror on display, I completely missed them. As far as I can tell, the theme is that I want to kill myself. Also Christmas, I suppose. But if we're letting that pass as a theme worth remarking on, then I'll have to accept that Hallmark movies deserve their own academic field, and I don't want to live in the universe where some poor PhD student has to suffer through the Christmas Prince, never mind the existential dread of a Christmas Prince, a royal wedding, or God forbid, a Christmas Prince, the royal baby, unless a Christmas Prince is secretly about the Vietnam War, in which case I will die to defend it, obviously. If you don't know the history of any of these conflicts Hamill is invoking here, I suppose you might be more sympathetic to the view that America was simply going into Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan to force democracy on these countries. But Hamill, as he says clearly in the tweet, was around for most of these. And unless he's intentionally paid no attention to the news since he came of age, including ignoring all the subtext of the movies that made his career, he for sure knows that it's not what any of these conflicts were about. But just in case you who are watching don't know about how these conflicts came about, or if you do and agree with them anyway, let me run down, in brief, what the fuck happened to bring the Americans into these countries to force democracy on the people there. According to the incredibly communist news source, the BBC, the USA entered the Korean War to contain communism, worrying that if Korea fell to communism, whatever that means, that Japan would too, which was very important to American trade. And if you think that doesn't sound like a great reason to go into a country, kill millions of people, prop up a fascist dictatorship and use chemical weapons on them, you'd be right, but that's exactly what they did. In fact, the pinko commies at the BBC insist that keeping trade with Japan going was the single most important reason for the USA invading Korea, a peninsula that is famously not in Japan. It was for these same reasons, preventing communism from being enforced on the other side of the world from the USA, that the USA invaded Vietnam, even more millions over decades, deploying Agent Orange, a chemical weapon considered a crime against humanity to use, which is still causing health problems in Vietnam to this day, to enforce American-friendly government and hegemony over trade in East Asia. Famously, invading somewhere, killing millions of citizens, razing their cities to the ground, and using chemical weapons on them so they'll be disabled for generations to come is the very definition of democracy. Democracy is when you massacre civilians. Even if you're the kind of Cold Warrior weirdo that thinks a country deciding it would rather be communist than capitulate to the United States, however, Iraq and Afghanistan were famously invaded by the USA long after the Cold War was over, as part of the USA's global war on terror, which, if you're even slightly familiar with the period, you'll know was also not about spreading democracy, but about establishing an American monopoly on Middle Eastern oil, giving the military-industrial complex a bunch of money, and collectively punishing the populations of Iraq and Afghanistan for the crimes of a group of Saudis, people from a country they not only never went to war with, but in fact allied with. Weird that. Anyway, these conflicts themselves would not have even happened without the fuckery the US did in the Cold War in this region. In fact, the Taliban, who the US was supposedly at war with in Afghanistan, were an offshoot of the US-backed fundamentalist Muslim guerrillas of the Mujahideen, who the US propped up to fuck with the Soviet Union, not caring how many Afghans had to die in the process. But sure, you can't force democracy on those who want it. Using Einstein for this is also fucking bananas, by the way. Einstein, as a Jewish man who escaped the clutches of the Nazis, I doubt would have many good things to say about persecuting minorities, whether in the name of democracy, as Hamill calls it, or otherwise. Einstein was also a committed socialist, so the wars in Korea and Vietnam to crush communism, not exactly something he would be super down for. Quite the opposite, actually. In Einstein's own words on his essay Why Socialism, "This crippling of individuals I consider the worst evil of capitalism. Our whole educational system suffers from this evil. An exaggerated competitive attitude is inculcated into the student, who is trained to worship academic success as a preparation for his future career. I am convinced there is only one way to eliminate these grave evils, namely through the establishment of a socialist economy, accompanied by an educational system which would be orientated towards social goals. In such an economy, the means of production are owned by society itself and are utilized in a planned fashion. A planned economy, which adjusts production to the needs of the community, would distribute the work to be done among all those able to work, and would guarantee a livelihood to every man, woman, and child. The education of the individual, in addition to promoting his own innate abilities, would attempt to develop in him a sense of responsibility for his fellow men, and place the glorification of power and success in our present society.
You're so beautiful. I know it.
And since Einstein was a noted critic of the state of Israel, criticizing its ideology as pretty much fascist from the start, to the point of being offered the role of the president and turning it down, it's notable that his face is so attached to this most mask off of Hamill's tweets, since even in the past month when Israel has turned up the heat and has genocides the people of Palestine, Mark Hamill's been standing firm in his support for Israel's fascist government, even while it commits crimes against humanity for the whole world to see. In fact, Einstein's words on the subject, as noted down in Einstein on Israel and Zionism by Fred Jerome, if they were actually heeded by those who use his visage to defend the US imperialism, as Hamill is, would make them think twice about associating him with their stances, especially if they are staunchly Zionists. In a December 4th, 1948 letter to the New York Times, Einstein, along with 28 other prominent members of the Jewish community, wrote that the then current Israeli political party, the Freedom Party, led by Menachem Begin, was a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. It is inconceivable that those who oppose fascism throughout the world, if correctly informed as to Mr. Begin's political record and perspectives, could add their name in support to the movement he represents, the letter continued. Referring to the massacre of Arabs by Jews in the village of Deir Yassin, the letter said, the terrorists, far from being ashamed of their act, were proud of the massacre. The Deir Yassin incident exemplifies the character and actions of the Freedom Party. Further describing the Freedom Party, the letter stated that it includes an admixture of ultranationalism, religious mysticism, and racial superiority, and that it bore the unmistakable stamp of a fascist party for whom terrorism against Jews, Arabs, and British alike, and misrepresentation are means, and a leader state is the goal. The letter ended by saying that America should turn its back on Begin and not support this latest manifestation of fascism. In any case, the opinions of Einstein are much closer to those of Luke Skywalker than the actor that actually played him. And while obviously people aren't required to agree with the opinions of the characters they play, that would be self-evidently ridiculous. I find it hard to imagine that if Hamill had considered the role of the rebels he played as the same point of view of the Vietnamese, as they were textually supposed to be, or the Koreans, the Iraqis, Afghans, or Palestinians, that he would be able to write such statements down without immediately deleting them in shame. But then again, as we've seen several times now on this channel, sometimes, no matter how otherwise laudable, whatever political tenets they come from, and whatever art they might make, some of these people that grew up during the Cold War have their brains broken permanently.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s against the man kind of thing, nested deep inside of a fantasy.
Or a colonial, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats.
That's
Don't know
right.
nothing.
That's right.
And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese.
Yep.
The irony of that one is in both of those, the little guys won.
Right.
And the big, highly technical empire,
The English Empire. Right.
English Empire, the American Empire,
Yep.
lost.
Yeah.
But William Shatner, he's a different story. Mark Hamill, I believe, genuinely thinks he's a force for good in the world. He tends to be pretty run-of-the-mill liberal centrist on most issues, and like many of the type in the United States, his more conservative side only properly shines through when it comes to matters of foreign policy. Not so with Shatner. Shatner is socially conservative back home and abroad. He's as close to a troll as you can be while being an actor so famous that Jeff fucking Bezos takes it to space in his midlife crisis rockets.
Is you're shooting up.
Oh my God.
Give me the champagne bottle.
Come here. I want one. I want to hear this. Here. You want a little of this? Okay.
Well, William Shatner trying to describe to Jeff Bezos exactly what he experienced, and they break away to the cheering and the champagne. But it was interesting. He was just trying to begin to say it was not what he expected at all. You can see a rather thoughtful William Shatner there, just taking stock of everything that has happened in the last half an hour.
So, what is happening with him? And how do we square that with everyone's favourite well, second favorite. Well, third. Okay, seventh favorite Star Trek captain, James Tiberius Kirk.
I have never watched Star Trek.
Really?
There are many episodes I don't know. There are some movies I don't know. I directed one of the movies called Number 5. I had to watch that one.
Well, Star Trek is even less subtle about its politics than Star Wars. I mean, we literally had an episode of Deep Space Nine about forming a union where Rom read aloud from the Communist Manifesto.
Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains.
What's happened to you?
By the time of The Next Generation, all subtlety about how the United Federation of Planets was supposed to be a socialist post-scarcity utopia was gone. But to give Shatner his due, it was a lot less openly utopian a world in the original series of Star Trek. And there were a few yikes moments here and there.
What a charming negress.
However, for the most part, it was very obvious what Gene Roddenberry was trying to do with the show. The very on-the-nose allegories for racism, colonialism, etc. were so obvious, you had to be literally in denial to ignore them, and the very presence of Uhura on the Enterprise was considered at the time to be a political statement, as was the kiss she shared with Kirk in one episode. A kiss which Shatner at the time played a key role in making sure stayed in the cut. So he definitely knew at least some of what was going on at the time, vis-a-vis the political statement of Star Trek as a show. Black people in space shouldn't be revolutionary, but at the time, it was very rarely heard of. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. himself told Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, that Star Trek was the only show he let his kids stay up late to watch for this exact reason.
I turn, and instead of fan, there's this face the world nose with this beautiful smile on it. And I remember thinking, whoever that fan is going to have to wait because Dr. Martin Luther King, my leader, is walking toward me, not 10 feet away, with a beautiful smile on his face. And then this man says, yes, Miss Nichols, I am that fan. I am your best fan, your greatest fan. And my family are your greatest fans. As a matter of fact, this is the only show on television that my wife, Coretta, and I will allow our little children to watch, to stay up and watch.
Now, Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, was a very complicated figure. And if you want to get into his exact vision for the show, I would very much recommend this video by Jessie, which covers the topic beautifully. However, he does seem to have been pretty consistent in trying to portray a more equal society in the future. And by the time of TNG, he was insisting that it be downright utopian. His last wife's quoted as saying that he identified as a communist, and a Maoist at that. And while we might look back now and see the problems with even the most utopian ideas of what the future might look like from the mind of a sex-crazed straight white American man, at the time the show was incredibly forward-looking. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek's creator, certainly subscribed to this optimism. He believed that humanity, rather than being doomed to self-destruct, was destined to evolve out of our political myopia. It was thanks to Roddenberry that the original series, though dated by today's standards, was ahead of its time with its multinational, multi-ethnic and multi-gender crew. In the words of Jean-Luc Picard himself, in conversation with one of us 21st century capitalist pig dogs, a lot has changed in the past 300 years.
People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We have eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy.
Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. Do I make myself clear?
You do, sir.
I would think all of this would at least shape Shatner's attitude towards the show he starred in, but apparently he's very confused about when Star Trek got woke. When the answer is, obviously, from episode 1, my man, you were fucking there. You were acting it out. One of the themes of profiles of Shatner that I found that make this kind of make sense is that the man is very much driven by ego. This is obvious from interviews to his falling out with Leonard Nimoy because Spock was so successful. Instead of Kirk hogging all the spotlight, the Shatnerverse of Star Trek, where Kirk is the big special boy who makes the universe go round because William Shatner's in charge of the story now, and that means that he personally is Kirk, and he can do anything, despite Shatner and Kirk actually having very little in common in real life. Kirk is, after all, a Starfleet captain, and Shatner is a literal 4chan troll, having spent a ton of time on the Kurtz's fuck message board, which would explain how he, as a boomer, started railing against social justice warriors and misandrists on Twitter. Like, going after PC culture and snowflakes, yeah, that's boomer talk. But those first couple of buzzwords, this man is online, and in the worst possible way. After basically decades of being the anti-Kirk in real life, William Shatner eventually ended up in the year of our Lord 2023, decrying wokeism, as if wokeism isn't basically a right-wing buzzword that describes practically all of the themes of Star Trek, including the episodes where he was the main character, namely all of the original series. In fact, this goes beyond being a troll just on certain issues. Shatner has previously aligned himself with the so-called alt-right, even claims to surf 4chan, and declined to speak against the intolerance of President Trump, joking that he might be deported. Shatner is Canadian. So is this just ego? Did Shatner gain so little from the experience of starring in the birth of one of the most progressive franchises of all time? Did he really just take away from the experience that he is the captain, therefore the most cool and important, and eventually drift so far from the person he was making on the show, being part of a tour de force that sought to push society forward, that he is one step removed from being an open fascist? Well, Shatner was, on set, apparently, already showing signs of the person he was to become. He used to steal Leonard Nimoy's bike on set to make life difficult for him, because he was so jealous of Spock's popularity. Nichelle Nichols would have left the show if not for the intervention of Martin Luther King Jr. himself, partially because of Shatner's behaviour. The actors who played Chekhov and Scotty apparently refused to speak with Shatner because of how he treated them on the show. And his relationship with George Takei, who played Sulu, was so fraught that their feud was ongoing for 40 years, only settling down in 2016. Shatner might have been a part of this world, a key member of the original Star Trek crew, but he was far from the ideal of Kirk from the very start, and that's only gotten worse over time, as his conservative ideals have become more and more entrenched, and his distance from the original series and his ego have convinced him that Star Trek was a much different beast than it actually was, that it was the Captain Kirk show, not a world of space socialists showing the way to a better world.
We represent the vegetarian space socialists who are always right. You guys are the worst. We know.
And so too, I think it is with Mark Hamill. His memories of Star Wars are not the same as those of George Lucas, just as those of William Shatner and Gene Roddenberry are wildly different. He had a different role to Lucas, and he took different things out of the experience. Just as it's possible for two people to read the same book and both get wildly different messages from it, it's perfectly plausible that two people might put great time and effort into creating the same media, and in their heads they are making something completely different, despite a unified vision coming to fruition, and despite whatever the script says. In Mark Hamill's head, Luke Skywalker probably wasn't a stand-in for the Viet Cong, despite the obvious allegory and the stated intentions of George Lucas. And even if he did know that and internalize it, it doesn't mean he has to agree with it. People hold contradictory beliefs in their heads all the time, so he could plausibly contain these multitudes and not get a migraine from the contradictions within. But more simply than that, his opinions are his own. He did not absorb the themes of Star Wars and carry them with him throughout his life, at least not the ones that contradicted what he already believed. Hell, Chris Evans is a pretty mainstream liberal, and he starred in Snowpiercer, which is as direct a metaphor for class struggle as you can get without literally just being a guy reading Karl Marx at you. Actors don't necessarily learn from their roles, at least not in a way we might think. And that's okay. What's not okay is the stances these actors have taken, and that's part of the tragedy of this. Not that the movies that we loved and taught us so much didn't rub off the same way on the people that have played the heroes in these movies, but that we can see how they should have inspired hope for a better world. A rejection of fascism and colonialism, an escape from conservative ways of thinking, an escape from US chauvinism in particular. And yet, here we are, Mark Hamill and William Shatner, sadly very ordinary white American boomers, despite the franchises they led, having produced so many people that are so much more. Thanks for watching. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like this video, why not leave a like, or leave a comment, or subscribe, and tell your friends about it. I am, unfortunately, for all of us, quite poor right now, so if you have a few coins burning a hole in your pockets and you hate to see a tram like me down on her luck, why not help me out? Why not help me out with my massive horrifying overdraft and send me some money? You can give one-time donations on Ko-fi or PayPal, links below, as always, or better yet, sign up to my Patreon, where you get early videos, access to the members-only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, and exclusive content such as long-form interviews with Princess Weeks, Rosencreutz, and Jessie Gender. In addition to all that good stuff, you'll also, if you sign up, get your name read out at the end of each video. Just like the other. Stephanie, Jason Cribbett, Raven Tempest, Shield Fade, Robin Podolsky, Infernal Ramblings, Exploding Turtle, Casual Observer, Terry Roberts, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Philip Tabroga, Belligerent Kitten, Soma Piglet, Brain Douche, 4IS, Artie Wolf, Hayden Gaylor, Greg Noble, No Kings, Only Fools, Deanna Macmillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, PJ Lisperl, Howard Lott, Lara Van Loon, Nara Nia, Scar Chan, and Joey Coble. Thank you so much, guys.